Imagine a nation rebuilt around a single man, one who trusted only a tight circle of loyal male elites to define its beliefs, enforce its rules, and shape its destiny. In this story, we step inside that inner world, where political power was concentrated in the hands of a few influential figures whose devotion, ambition, and ruthless loyalty helped construct one of the most oppressive regimes of the 20th century. These men were more than advisors. They were architects of ideology, overseers of daily governance, and guardians of a distorted vision that reshaped an entire society. Understanding how this circle formed and why it held such power reveals the hidden mechanics of authoritarian control. It shows how a small group, bound by personal loyalty and driven by competition, could influence millions and bend a nation's institutions to their will. Through their decisions, rivalries, and unwavering obedience, they laid the foundation for a system built on fear, manipulation, and absolute authority. As we explore the dynamics of this elite brotherhood, we uncover not only the strategies they used to maintain dominance, but also the vulnerabilities that would one day contribute to their downfall. Their story is a stark reminder of how fragile societies can become when power is concentrated in the hands of a select few, especially when that power goes unquestioned. If you find this kind of deep historical storytelling compelling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next exploration into the forces that have shaped our world. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful, eye-opening stories to life. From the moment this inner circle began shaping the direction of the nation, another force quietly bound their vision together, an ideology that placed men at the center of every sphere of influence and imagined the future through a strict hierarchy of gender. This worldview was not an afterthought, but a core pillar of how the regime understood order, strength, and identity. To them, society functioned best when men occupied roles of command, strategy, and public authority, while women were guided toward lives defined by family, child rearing, and devotion to the household. It was a belief system woven into policy, culture, and even education, influencing how millions understood their place in the world. Within this framework, the men surrounding the leader saw themselves as the embodiment of national purpose. They viewed leadership as a natural extension of their gender, believing that discipline, resolve, and strategic thinking were uniquely masculine traits that set them apart. This conviction shaped not only their personal ambitions but also the policies they crafted, policies that elevated men as protectors and decision-makers while narrowing the possibilities available to women. In their eyes, a strong state required male authority at every level and female obedience as a foundation for stability. The ideal man was envisioned as a determined guardian of the nation, and the ideal woman as a dedicated contributor to its future through family and tradition. The inner circle reinforced these beliefs through institutions, expectations, and a constant stream of public messages. Schools taught young boys to aspire to positions of responsibility and toughness, while girls were encouraged to dream of marriage, nurturance, and service to the family. Cultural programs praised male heroism and framed domestic life as the highest achievement for women. This division of roles was presented as harmonious and natural, a design that supposedly ensured order and unity. In reality, it created invisible boundaries that shaped lives long before individuals could choose their own paths. Inside the corridors of power, this ideology shaped every decision the elites made. They believed that maintaining a strict patriarchal order was essential for the endurance of the nation, and that any shift in these gender roles might weaken the structure they were trying to preserve. Their meetings, strategies, and long-term visions rested on the assumption that authority belonged to men. And this assumption influenced how they governed, how they justified their actions, and how they interpreted loyalty and duty. The circle's internal dynamics echoed these beliefs as well. rivalries, alliances, and ambitions unfolded within a competitive environment that expected men to prove their dominance, assert their worth, and seek influence in ways that upheld their vision of masculinity. For women, this worldview translated into a narrowing of possibility. Their participation in public life was limited not only by law but also by cultural expectation, and the promise of recognition or achievement outside family life was rarely offered. Many found themselves defined entirely by their homes, their children, and the roles assigned to them by a system that saw their contributions as valuable only when tethered to domestic responsibility. Even those with aspirations beyond these boundaries struggled to overcome the vast cultural and institutional pressures, pushing them back into traditional roles. In the broader story, this patriarchal foundation reveals how the regime's power was maintained not only through political dominance, but through the reshaping of everyday life, guiding how people saw themselves and each other. The elites believed that controlling gender roles was as important as controlling institutions. And by enforcing this vision, they crafted a society built on hierarchy, conformity, and the conviction that authority should remain in the hands of a select group of men. This belief shaped the identity of the nation just as powerfully as any policy or decree, binding the inner circle's ambitions to a social structure designed to support their rule. As this vision of male authority took root and shaped every corner of society, the inner circle that surrounded the leader began to emerge not only as symbols of this ideology, but as its driving force. They were the ones who transformed abstract beliefs into concrete systems, translating the worldview of dominance, hierarchy, and control into policies that reached millions. Among them, a few figures stood out for the scale of power they wielded and the influence they carried within the regime's carefully constructed order. Their paths to prominence differed, but each man occupied a domain so essential that together they formed the framework through which the entire nation was governed. They were the keepers of propaganda, the architects of security, and the overseers of economic direction, ensuring that the ideals at the top flowed seamlessly into the daily lives of the people. These men operated within a structure where personal loyalty mattered as much as expertise, and where devotion to the leader became the currency of advancement. One of the most influential was a figure who built an extensive security apparatus, enforcing policy with a network that reached into homes, institutions, and private conversations. His role was to ensure that loyalty was not just expected but monitored, and that any form of dissent, however quiet, could be located and neutralized. Through this system, control extended beyond public spaces into the private sphere, tightening the grip of the inner circle on society in ways that were both visible and unseen. His work supported a culture of fear that reinforced the hierarchy the regime valued, creating an environment where obedience became second nature. Another key figure carved his power from the realm of communication, shaping the stories, images, and messages that molded public perception. He understood that ideas could be as powerful as armies, and through newspapers, radio, films, and speeches, he crafted a world in which the leader's authority felt not only necessary but inevitable. Every message served a purpose, weaving together national pride, unity, and the patriarchal order that underpinned the regime's identity. By controlling the narrative, he shaped how people understood themselves, their roles, and their place within the society that the inner circle envisioned. His influence stretched into homes and imaginations, guiding emotions as effectively as policies guided actions. Then there was the man who oversaw vast sectors of the economy, managing resources and industries in ways that supported the ambitions of the regime. He was tasked with ensuring that production, labor, and material strength aligned with the goals set from above. His domain required balancing practical needs with ideological expectations, transforming economic strategy into another instrument of consolidation. Under his oversight, industries grew, military capacity expanded, and the inner circle's larger plans gained the material foundation they needed to advance. His authority touched factories, workers, and the nation's resources, shaping the everyday realities of countless individuals who lived within the economic structure he supervised. Together, these men embodied the regime's fusion of ideology and governance. Their roles did not exist in isolation but worked in concert, each enabling the other to function more effectively. The security apparatus supported the messaging by silencing opposing voices. The propaganda machine reinforced the social order that justified the hierarchy. The economic system provided the means to sustain these structures. Their influence formed a web that connected personal loyalty, strategic ambition, and national direction, binding the leader's vision to the mechanisms of power that defined the nation's reality. Within this network, the patriarchal worldview was not merely maintained but actively strengthened. The men who commanded these sectors saw themselves as enforcers of order, creators of purpose, and guardians of the ideology they believed was essential for endurance. Their cooperation and rivalry shaped the evolution of the inner circle, and their authority extended into the lives of ordinary citizens whose daily experiences were silently structured by decisions made at the top. Through their combined efforts, the regime's vision became tangible, and the society they governed moved deeper into a world where power flowed through a narrow channel of loyalty, ambition, and unwavering belief in their own entitlement to lead. As the inner circle strengthened its influence and the structures of authority expanded across every level of society, a deeper cultural transformation began to take shape, one that defined not only how power was exercised, but what it meant to embody that power. At the heart of this transformation was a model of masculinity that elevated discipline, toughness, and the belief in belonging to a superior lineage. This ideal was woven into the identity of the state, shaping the ambitions of its leaders and guiding the expectations placed upon its citizens. It was a vision of manhood that demanded unwavering resolve and presented dominance as both natural and necessary, reinforcing the authority of the ruling elite and giving moral shape to the direction the nation was being led. Within this cultural framework, strength was measured not just by physical endurance, but by the willingness to uphold the values of the regime without hesitation. This understanding of masculinity became a lens through which the inner circle interpreted loyalty, leadership, and the purpose of their own actions. They believed that a strong nation required men who could embody determination and confront challenges without visible doubt. In their view, authority had to be demonstrated through firmness, and threats, whether political, social, or imagined, had to be met with decisive force. This mindset justified the tightening of internal controls and gave the security apparatus a mandate to act as guardian of the ideals the regime cherished. The expectation that men should display unwavering discipline provided a rationale for policies designed to suppress dissent and mold society into a uniform expression of the leader's vision. Responsibility became tied to the belief that only those who embodied this ideal could be trusted to guide the nation. Beyond internal control, this cultural model also influenced how the leaders understood their place in the world. They saw themselves as protectors of a legacy that they believed must be asserted beyond their borders. The inner circle interpreted discipline and strength as qualities that demanded outward projection, shaping a worldview in which conflict was not simply a possibility but a validation of their ideals. This mindset wove ambition into ideology, making expansion and confrontations seem like natural extensions of the roles they believed they had been born to fulfill. The attributes they admired in themselves, rigidity, endurance, and a sense of superiority, became the foundation for policies that pushed the state toward external aggression. The inner circle's belief in their own vision of masculinity became inseparable from their understanding of the nation's destiny. This model was reinforced throughout society in subtle and overt ways. Education trained boys to see toughness, endurance, and authority as their birthright, while cultural programs glorified a version of manhood centered on resolve and confrontation. Sports, ceremonies, and public rituals all served as stages where these values were celebrated, teaching young men that their worth was measured through their ability to align with the ideals set by the ruling elite. The result was a generation shaped from early youth to embody the traits deemed essential for the nation's future, encouraged to adopt a mindset where duty outweighed individuality and where their strength was defined by their ability to serve the goals laid out for them. Within the inner circle itself, this understanding of masculinity fueled competition as much as cooperation. Each figure sought to prove not only his loyalty but his personal embodiment of the ideals the regime valued most. Rivalries took shape as men attempted to display initiative, power, and strategic brilliance, believing that these qualities confirmed their place within the hierarchy. The environment became one where assertion and ambition were expected, creating a political landscape shaped by constant maneuvering as each leader sought to demonstrate his strength. Their actions were not only political decisions but performances of identity, reinforcing the cultural model that defined their authority. Through this blend of belief and ambition, the ideology of discipline and superiority provided a coherent justification for the direction the regime took. It connected the private loyalties of the inner circle with the public identity they sought to impose on the nation, turning masculinity into a tool of governance and a symbol of the state's identity. In shaping themselves as embodiments of this ideal, the inner circle shaped the society around them, guiding it toward a future defined by control at home and confrontation beyond its borders. As the ideals of discipline, strength, and superiority continued to shape the inner circle's self-image and the identity they projected onto the nation, another powerful instrument worked tirelessly to embed these beliefs into the minds of millions. It was through the constant flow of crafted messages, images, and narratives that the regime ensured its vision of authority felt natural, inevitable, and even necessary. Propaganda became the quiet architect of social order, taking the ideals forged within the corridors of power and carrying them into every home, school, and public conversation. It transformed abstract concepts into lived realities by presenting male leadership not merely as tradition, but as the anchor upon which the nation's endurance depended. Through this lens, men were portrayed as protectors, decision-makers, and guardians of stability, while women were guided toward the roles the regime deemed essential to its future. The individual who oversaw this vast domain understood that influence did not rely solely on force but on persuasion shaped with precision. His mastery of narrative allowed him to construct a world that aligned perfectly with the ambitions of the inner circle. Films, posters, speeches, and newsreels depicted men as pillars of authority and courage, reinforcing the idea that their strength formed the backbone of national identity. Every carefully chosen image of determination, every story of heroic duty, and every portrayal of unwavering leadership echoed the values championed by those in power. This crafted vision reached millions with a consistency that left little room for alternative interpretations of gender roles or societal order. People were not simply told how to see the world. They were immersed in it until it felt inseparable from reality. This messaging did more than elevate men. It drew sharp boundaries around the expectations placed on women. Through idealized portrayals of domestic life, motherhood, and service to family, propaganda created a cultural landscape where women's contributions were acknowledged only when they aligned with the roles assigned to them. Public celebrations of nurturing, home building, and quiet devotion served to reinforce the belief that the strength of the nation depended on women maintaining these duties. The contrast between the celebrated heroism of men and the prescribed responsibilities of women became a tool that shaped aspirations, choices, and identities. It outlined a vision of society where stability was achieved through a clear division of roles, presented not as restriction but as destiny. Within the structures of power, the leaders recognized how indispensable this messaging had become. Propaganda offered a means to connect their ideological ambitions to the daily experiences of the people, ensuring that the cultural model of authority was embraced rather than resisted. It created a unified story that tied personal identity to national purpose, making the patriarchal order appear not only functional but noble. Through this relentless repetition, the ideals of the inner circle gained a permanence that political decrees alone could not provide. Even routine activities, attending school, listening to radio broadcasts, watching public ceremonies, became subtle lessons in the values the regime sought to instill. This cultural environment strengthened the position of the inner circle in ways that extended beyond politics. Their authority seemed confirmed by the very stories that praised their qualities, making their leadership appear indispensable. The attributes they valued in themselves were echoed in the narratives that reached the public, creating a cycle where propaganda reinforced their sense of identity while also shaping the expectations of the society they governed. The vision of masculinity they admired became the standard against which all behavior was measured, while the roles assigned to women were justified as contributions vital to the nation's well-being. Through these messages, the hierarchy forged within the inner circle expanded outward, shaping the entire structure of society. In this world shaped by crafted narratives, power did not rely solely on commands or policies. Instead, it rested on a shared belief system, one built through repetition, imagery, and storytelling that touched every aspect of daily life. Propaganda transformed ideology into a lived experience, ensuring that the patriarchal order the inner circle relied upon felt not imposed but inevitable, a natural extension of the values the nation had been taught to embrace. As the narratives crafted by the regime spread through newspapers, classrooms, and public events, they shaped not only how men understood their responsibilities, but also how women came to see their place within the carefully constructed social order. The stories that celebrated male authority and public leadership were paired with equally powerful messages about the expected duties of women, creating a vision of society that depended on a clearly defined separation of roles. Within this worldview, women were not regarded as participants in political life or contributors to national decision-making. Instead, they were guided toward a destiny rooted in family, domestic responsibilities, and the expectation that their value lay in shaping the next generation according to the ideals the inner circle held sacred. This vision did not emerge by accident, but was carefully woven into the cultural fabric through policy, expectation, and repeated affirmation. The inner circle believed that stability rested on firm distinctions between the roles of men and women, and they used their authority to ensure these distinctions were reflected in every institution. Women were systematically discouraged from pursuing leadership positions or public influence, not through open hostility but through a complex web of cultural reinforcement and legal boundaries. Even those who possessed education, skill, and ambition found few avenues available to them in a system designed to narrow their horizons long before choices could be made. Opportunities for political engagement were limited, and the voices of women rarely reached the spaces where decisions that shaped the nation were debated. Their absence became a defining feature of the political landscape, which only reinforced the belief that public life belonged exclusively to men. Inside homes, schools, and community programs, expectations were communicated with a sense of certainty and inevitability. Young girls were raised to see family life as their central purpose, taught that nurturing children and maintaining the household were not merely personal choices but contributions that upheld the future of the nation. This narrative framed domestic responsibility as a form of service, giving it an appearance of honor while quietly restricting the autonomy of those expected to fulfill it. Cultural symbols, educational materials, and public ceremonies all participated in shaping this ideal, creating an environment where women were praised for devotion but not offered the space to explore aspirations beyond it. Their path was defined before they could choose it, guided by a system that valued conformity to traditional roles above all else. The leaders who crafted these expectations believed that a stable society required women to focus on the family, and they encouraged this vision with relentless consistency. Women were celebrated primarily for their role in raising children who would embody the ideals promoted by the regime. Their contribution to the nation was framed through the lens of caregiving and continuity, and the identity they were offered centered on the belief that their greatest value lay in shaping the future within the walls of their homes. This cultural guidance, reinforced through policy and social expectation, created boundaries that many internalized, believing they were fulfilling a purpose essential to the nation's strength. As these expectations took root, women's absence from political and public spaces became both symptom and cause of the imbalance crafted by the inner circle. Their exclusion allowed the ruling elite to maintain control without challenge from voices outside the patriarchal structure they had constructed. The lack of women in leadership created an echo chamber of male perspectives that shaped decisions, policies, and the national narrative. This self-reinforcing cycle allowed the inner circle to operate with little resistance, supported by a cultural environment that had already absorbed their vision of order. In this system, women lived within boundaries shaped by ideology rather than choice. Their stories were guided by expectations they did not create, and their aspirations, when they stretched beyond the roles provided, often struggled against a society trained to see such desires as incompatible with national purpose. Through these cultural and institutional pressures, the inner circle extended its influence into the most personal corners of daily life, shaping not only the public image of the nation, but the private identities of those who inhabited it. Within a society structured so rigidly around male authority, where roles were divided and reinforced through education, messaging, and daily expectation, the inner circle did not stand as a harmonious brotherhood, but as a collection of ambitious figures shaped by the very ideals they promoted. The cultural model that elevated discipline, dominance, and unwavering certainty did more than define what it meant to be a man within the regime. It shaped the behavior of those at the top, influencing how they worked, competed, and sought influence. The patriarchal order that governed the nation created an environment where strength was constantly measured, and every display of decisiveness became a statement of personal worth. Within this structure, rivalry grew not as an unintended consequence, but as a natural expression of the ideals celebrated by the leaders themselves, guiding the way they maneuvered for power, recognition, and proximity to the center of authority. These rivalries unfolded in quiet conversations, strategic alliances, and decisive actions taken to demonstrate initiative. Each man believed he had a unique understanding of the nation's direction, a sense of purpose shaped by the same narratives that defined the broader identity of the state. Their ambition was fueled not only by personal desire, but by a cultural expectation that leaders should assert themselves with confidence and pursue their goals with determination. As they shaped policies, influenced institutions, and managed their own domains, their actions often overlapped or clashed, creating a political environment defined by constant negotiation and subtle contest. Yet they rarely viewed these tensions as flaws. Instead, they saw them as part of the natural order, a reflection of the competitive spirit they believed kept authority strong. This environment proved invaluable to the leader at the center of it all, who understood that authority could be preserved by ensuring no single figure accumulated enough influence to threaten the delicate balance he relied upon. By allowing rivalries to persist and occasionally encouraging them, he created a structure in which each man depended on his favor, yet remained wary of the ambitions of his peers. Their competition became a silent tool of control, limiting cohesion and preventing unified challenges to his authority. The patriarchal ideals that shaped their identity strength. assertiveness. Confidence became instruments he could manipulate, guiding the direction of his inner circle while maintaining his position as the one figure whose authority remained unquestioned. The men within this circle often viewed their rivalry as a test of their commitment and capability. Each sought to embody the values they believed defined leadership, pushing themselves to demonstrate reliability and strategic insight. Their competition fostered innovation within their domains, but also created friction that shaped the internal dynamics of the regime. Policies were influenced not only by ideology but by the need to prove competence, and decisions were sometimes made with an eye toward personal standing rather than broader necessity. This atmosphere reinforced the patriarchal assumptions that governed the nation, turning ambition into an expectation and rivalry into a measure of worth. As this structure solidified, it shaped the way governance functioned. Authority flowed through a network of men constantly evaluating one another, measuring their influence, and interpreting the leader's expectations. Their desire to maintain proximity to him drove them to reaffirm his vision, echo his beliefs, and compete for his approval. This dynamic allowed him to maintain influence without direct intervention in every decision. By positioning himself above the fray, he became the focal point around which all ambitions revolved, the figure whose favor could elevate careers or end them. The patriarchal order that dismissed the political potential of women concentrated every ounce of authority into a realm defined by male competition, creating an environment where power was earned through performance as much as policy. In this world shaped by ambition and rivalry, the inner circle existed within a balance carefully sustained by the leader's understanding of their motivations. Their competition kept them aligned while preventing the unity that could challenge his authority. The very ideals they embraced, discipline, resolve, certainty, became the framework that allowed him to rule without constant confrontation. Through this system, authority remained anchored not only in ideology but in the personalities of those who served it. Shaped by the same cultural beliefs, they worked to impose upon the society beyond the walls of power. As the final months of the regime unfolded, the pillars that once seemed unshakable began to crumble with startling speed, revealing just how dependent the entire system had been on obedience, force, and carefully crafted illusions. The world watched a structure built on dominance and hierarchical control collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. For years, the leadership had promoted the image of absolute unity and unwavering discipline. Yet behind the scenes the foundations were fractured, sustained more by fear than by genuine stability. When the external pressure intensified and the inner circle could no longer rely on influence or intimidation, the tightly guarded facade dissolved, leaving behind a landscape marked by confusion, failed ambitions, and abandoned loyalty. This unraveling exposed the reality that a power model built on exclusion and manipulation could not endure once the mechanisms that reinforced it began to fail. The ideology that had been projected as immutable showed itself to be deeply vulnerable. Its survival tied not to the strength of its principles, but to the ability of a few individuals to maintain control through rivalry, secrecy, and rigid structures. When those individuals faltered, the entire framework collapsed with them. What had once been presented as an unstoppable force revealed itself as a system that had never possessed true resilience, relying instead on the constant reinforcement of fear, hierarchy, and myth-making. In the aftermath, the layers peeled back to show how heavily this power structure depended on the dominance of select leaders whose authority could not withstand the strain of internal breakdown and external confrontation. Their attempts to hold the system together only further highlighted its fragility, as the very dynamics that once kept them in command now accelerated their downfall. The collapse served as a stark reminder of how precarious any system becomes when it concentrates authority narrowly, suppresses critical voices, and elevates control over cooperation. As we reflect on this story, It becomes clear that understanding how such structures rise and fall is essential for recognizing the warning signs in other contexts and ensuring that history is neither forgotten nor repeated. Thank you so much for listening, and if you found this exploration insightful, please remember to like the video, share it with others who might appreciate it, and subscribe to the channel for more thoughtful content. Your support helps the channel grow and allows more stories like this to be told.